Well, today's the day. About a year ago, we built a pond on our property, and it's just now getting full enough with water that we think we're ready to stock it. So today we're going to head into town and meet a fish truck there and get a load of fish, and then that way we'll come back and put them in the pond later on today. But there's a couple of specific techniques that you should use when you're stocking your pond to ensure the long-term health and viability of your fish, and I'll share those with you in today's video. So we made it to town. About once a month when it's warm, like in the spring, summer, and a little bit into the fall, there'll be a fish delivery truck that shows up at our local hardware store in town, and they're here today for about an hour. I pre-ordered my order of fish so that way they'd be here and I wouldn't have to pick through what they have left. So I made a specific order of fish based on a specific recommendation. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But anyway, the fish truck is here. They're unloading right now. We're going to find our place in line, get our fish, and immediately head back home. And so we're back home now. We made it home with the bags of fish. And the way they load these fish from the truck is they'll put them in oxygenated bags. So there's plenty of oxygen in there to keep them alive for a while. But you're going to be doing your fish a favor if you'll go ahead and get them put in the water as soon as you can. And there's a pretty specific technique to that I think ensures the life of your fish for a long time to come. So we started planning for this moment well before the pond ever caught a drop of water. And so last spring, right when the pond was built, we started putting an artificial structure in the pond. And what that artificial structure is just hiding places that the prey fish can hide from. And so in this pond, you're gonna have a typical predator-prey relationship. We're putting in largemouth bass, which we love bass fishing, so we're putting in largemouth bass. And those are predator fish, and they're gonna prey upon the bluegills and the minnows that we're putting in. Now, this pond is probably 2/3 of the way full now, maybe 3/4 of the way full, but when completely full, it will cover about 1.5 acres of surface area. And with that size in mind and what we're wanting to accomplish, we went to our state extension service, which in Texas is called Texas Cooperative Extension, and they made specific recommendations as to how we should stock this pond. And for this pond, 1.5 acres, because we want to bass fish, we're not going to catfish in this pond. In this pond, we're putting 10 pounds of flathead minnows. They're a prey fish, a bait fish. We're putting in 250 bluegill, which will give us something to catch as they grow a little bit bigger. And then the third thing we're putting in, we got 25 largemouth bass that over time they'll populate as the prey species can handle the predator species like the bass. Then the bass will repopulate over time. But there's a couple of methods we need to make sure we adhere to, so that way when we turn the fish loose, they're going to live and thrive and be healthy. So one of the first things we do is we got to acclimate the fish. You know, when they came off the truck, the temperature of the water was one thing. We put them in the back of the truck and made about a 10-minute drive from town, and the temperature of water may have adjusted a little bit. But before we just dump them in the pond, we need to acclimate them a little bit. You know, fish are cold-blooded creatures, and so they're real sensitive to their environment around them. So that way, so they don't incur thermal shock, we don't just dump them in the water right offhand. So one of the first things we do is we just take those bags and just put them right on top of the water and let them float there for about 10 minutes. And what that's going to do is it's going to take the water temperature that the fish are living in and match it to the ambient temperature that's around them. And so once about 10 minutes have passed, we're ready to start turning the fish loose. The second thing we're going to do when we get ready to turn the fish loose is we're going to slowly just introduce some pond water into the bags and just slowly mix them together and just do it real slow. It doesn't have to take 10 or 15 minutes, but over about a minute, I'm going to slowly introduce pond water into the water, and that will help the fish from any kind of thermal shock or any kind of shock just because their environment is changing so abruptly. Because remember, these fish have been raised in one kind of water, they've been transported a long way to get here, and then on this final step, this is no time to let up on the diligence. So take a couple extra minutes, let the water kind of acclimate to the fish's water they're already living in, and then once they start swimming off, they're on their own from there, and you've done your part. We've had a couple of minutes pass, so now we're going to take the rubber bands off these bags and then turn the fish loose into the water. These rubber bands are a little harder to get off than I thought they were going to be. So yeah, now instead of just dumping them out, what I'm going to do is just introduce a little bit of the pond water into here and just let it kind of trickle in real slowly, and that'll just kind of mix in with with the fish. And then slowly those fish are instinctively going to feel that water moving, and they're going to try to move out into the pond at large. Okay, those fish are swimming around pretty good, so we're going to go to the next one. And again, I'm doing these in order because the last bag I put in hasn't acclimated as much as the first bag has. So again, this technique is not at all rocket science. It's just trying to slowly introduce the fish to the new water and get them used to get them used to the temperature. And again, just ensuring that they're going to be successful. So these are our, I just turned the minnows loose a minute ago. These are bluegill sunfish. So just slowly let the water mix, and that's what it's doing. And then once it mixes, those fish will slowly find their way out. As I get ready to turn loose this last bag of largemouth bass, I can already look around and see these little fish swimming all in these weeds and stuff around me. And really, these weeds growing in has been a benefit, because as these weeds grow, there's little bugs that are on the weeds, there's algae growing everywhere. So this has already got a good food base for a lot of these fish to survive already. Now, when we built the pond, again, we planned ahead of time. We've got structure out there. The food base is in place here because as these weeds grew up and we put artificial cover out here, the algae and the little microscopic organisms that live in here, as well as the small insects and bugs, are going to create food for the prey species that we have in here, the minnows and the bluegill. They're already in place. So as those fish thrive, the largemouth are going to have something to eat on, so they're going to thrive over time. And now these fish are all swimming up here close right now, but over time they'll disperse throughout the pond. They'll start to populate, and then when it's all said and done, we'll have a well-stocked pond that we'll still need to manage. It's not just set it and forget it, but we'll still need to manage it. But over time, as we manage this pond and be able to take fish out and monitor the health of the fish that are in here, we should have a really great fishery that'll last a long time on this farm and give us a lot of enjoyment in the process.